Imagine you're driving down a lonely highway at dusk, just you, your faithful canine partner, and the fading light. Suddenly, your dog starts barking uncontrollably at the side of the road. You slow down, heart racing, and there it is, an old suitcase, abandoned and out of place. You open it and find a newborn baby wrapped in a thin blanket, barely breathing. What would you do? Who could have left this innocent child all alone, in the dark, with no one around? Tonight, you're about to hear the story of how one brave canine's sharp nose uncovered a life hidden in silence. A desperate secret waiting to be revealed. Stay with us. This is just the beginning. The cold wind swept down the lonely stretch of Highway 37, just as the last light of day slipped behind the horizon. Officer Jake Reynolds gripped the steering wheel tightly, his eyes scanning the road ahead. Beside him, Rex, his German Shepherd partner, sat alert, ears twitching, nose twitching, ready for anything. The world outside was settling into silence, the kind of silence that felt heavy, almost like a warning. Jake was used to long patrols on this quiet, rural Ruta road, lined with dense woods on one side and a patchwork of farm fields on the other. It wasn't exactly the kind of place. People vanished without a trace, or so he thought. "All right, Rex, let's keep it steady," Jake said softly, his voice barely above the hum of the engine. "Nothing but crickets tonight." But then Rex's calm demeanor shattered like glass. The dog's ears pinned back, hackles rose along his spine, and with a sudden burst of energy, he lunged forward, barking sharply toward the side of the road. His paws hit the gravel, sending stones flying as he sprinted toward a dark shape resting. Just beyond the edge of the pavement, Jake slammed on the brakes, heart pounding. The headlights illuminated an old, battered suitcase sitting alone on the shoulder, half hidden under a twisted bush. "What the hell?" Jake muttered, sliding. Out of the patrol car with his flashlight in hand, Rex was circling the suitcase, barking urgently, his tail stiff and wagging fast, a strange mixture of warning and excitement. The suitcase looked out of place, abandoned like a lost relic. It was stained, the leather cracked and faded, with heavy brass clasps that seemed ready to give way under the weight of whatever was inside. Jake crouched carefully, shining the flashlight over the suitcase. "Rex, easy," he whispered, though his voice was shaky. The dog circled again, nose pressed to the ground, sniffing. He growled softly, a deep rumble that sent a chill down Jake's spine. Could be anything, Jake thought, but something's not right. Slowly, Jake reached out, fingers trembling just slightly. The suitcase was surprisingly light. A knot formed in his throat as he unclipped the latches, the hinges groaning in protest. He lifted the light end, immediately froze. Inside, wrapped in a thin fraying blanket, was a newborn baby. No more than a few hours old, eyes shut tight against the fading light. The baby's tiny chest rose and fell with faint, uneven breaths. Jake's breath caught. This wasn't just some lost luggage. This was a silent cry for help. Rex sat beside him, head tilted, watching carefully, as if sensing the gravity of the moment. "Stay calm, Kid Jake," said softly, pulling out his radio. "Dispatch, this is Officer Reynolds. I've got an abandoned infant, alive but in distress, near mile marker 42 on Highway 37, requesting immediate medical assistance and backup." The radio crackled with static, but the calm voice of dispatch answered quickly. "Copy that, Officer Reynolds. EMS and backup units are en route. Hold position." Jake wrapped the baby gently in his jacket, careful not to jostle her fragile body. He glanced at Rex, who sat silently, eyes wide but steady, like a guardian on watch. Minutes dragged by, the road empty except for the faint glow of distant headlights approaching. Jake glanced up and down the dark tree line, the shadows seeming to close in. Who could have left a baby here, on a cold, empty road? His mind raced with questions. Was the baby's mother nearby? Was she hurt? Or was this some kind of desperate act, a secret no one dared to speak aloud? Jake wasn't just a cop tonight. He was a lifeline. Halfway through the tense wait, Jake's phone buzzed with a text. It was a message from the YouTube channel he'd recently started following Brave Animals, which featured stories of heroic animals and the people who work with them. He glanced at the screen, the headline flashing, "Canine Heroes Save Lives. Real stories you can't miss." A small smile cracked through the tension. Hey, if you want to hear more stories like this about dogs like Rex, heroes who save lives when it counts, most make sure you hit that subscribe button on Brave Animals. Jake muttered to himself, then laughed softly. Yeah, Rex, you'd be a star there. Rex barked once, as if in agreement. The sirens broke the silence, growing louder, flashing red and blue lights slicing through the darkness. EMS and backup officers arrived, and Jake handed over the baby to the paramedics, who immediately began life-saving procedures. One of the medics, a woman with gentle eyes named Sarah, nodded reassuringly. She's stable for now, but we need to get her to the hospital quickly. Jake watched as the ambulance sped away, the little life inside carried away from danger, at least for now. He turned back to Rex, who was already scanning the woods, nose to the ground. We need to know who left her here. Someone out there knows what happened, Jake said firmly. Rex led the way, following a faint scent trail away from the highway, deeper into the trees. Jake followed, flashlight cutting through the thickening darkness, heart pounding with every step. The trail was faint but there broken branches. A smear of blood on a rock, a child's lost mitten tangled in the brush. Pieces of a puzzle Jake wasn't yet ready to solve. The cold night closed in around them, but Jake felt something else, a strange mix of hope and dread. This was only the beginning. Who was the desperate parent? What danger lurked behind this abandoned suitcase? And most importantly, would they find the answers before it was too late? The wind whispered through the trees as Jake and Rex disappeared into the shadows, the silent signal of a story that demanded to be heard. Taillights disappeared into the night, swallowed by the winding highway as Jake stood alone on the shoulder. The weight of the night settling heavily on his shoulders, Rex sat quietly at his side, ears perked, nose twitching, still alert to every sound. The cool air smelled of pine and damp earth, but beneath it all was something else, a faint, elusive trace of fear and desperation that clung to the darkness. Jake exhaled slowly, trying to steady his nerves. The baby, fragile and tiny, was now in the hands of medical professionals. But the questions gnawing at him wouldn't go away. Who left her there, and why? He glanced back toward the suitcase, now empty but still ominous in the dim light. No tags, no identification, just that thin, threadbare blanket wrapped tight enough to hold a secret, but not enough to keep her safe. Let's see what we can find, Jake murmured, patting Rex's head. The dog stood instantly ready to work. The officers who had responded set up a perimeter, combing the roadside for any clues. Jake joined Detective Lisa Moreno, a sharp-eyed veteran with years of experience in missing persons cases. She knelt beside the suitcase, carefully bagging the blanket and other small debris. This was no accident, Lisa said grimly. Someone planned this. Jake nodded, the lines of exhaustion deepening around his eyes. She was left out here, in the middle of nowhere. No note, no sign of anyone nearby. Lisa sighed, rubbing the back of her neck. Sometimes the only way to save a kid is to disappear them first. But someone's bound to crack under pressure. Jake looked down the dark tree line where Rex had sniffed earlier. Rex picked up a scent leading into those woods. Maybe the person who left her or someone who knows Morez still close. They decided to send a small team with Rex to follow the trail carefully, marking their way with GPS trackers. The night was deepening, and the woods swallowed sound and light, turning every shadow into a potential threat. As the search party moved cautiously, Jake stayed behind, returning to his patrol car to start logging the incident and coordinating with the hospital. Every time his phone buzzed with a new update or message, his heart jumped. At 2:14 a.m., a text came in from the hospital. Baby is stable, but critical. No signs of identification or medical history. No ID, no clues. Just a helpless child, and a mystery growing darker by the minute. Jake leaned back in his seat, rubbing his temples. Who would do this? He whispered aloud. Meanwhile, deep in the woods, Rex was pulling ahead, nose to the ground, ears flicking back and forth. The scent trail was faint, patchy at best, but the dog was relentless. The officers followed in single file, flashlights bobbing like fireflies. Scanning the tangled underbrush, suddenly, Rex stopped and growled low. Ahead, a narrow dirt path led to an old abandoned cabin, half hidden by creeping ivy and fallen branches. Lisa signaled to Jake over the radio, We're at the cabin. No signs of anyone here, but it looks like someone's been using it recently. Jake felt a shiver that had nothing to do with the cold. The place reeked of secrets. He urged the team to proceed with caution. Inside the cabin was a mess of overturned furniture and scattered belongings. A broken chair lay near the fireplace, along with a torn piece of fabric that looked oddly familiar. Jake bent down, heart pounding. It matched the baby's blanket. "This is where they were," Lisa said quietly. "Someone hid out here, maybe the baby's caretaker." Rex sniffed a spot near the back door and suddenly barked, alerting the team to a small, muddy footprint pressed into the dirt floor. It was small, child-sized but fresh. Jake's mind raced. Was the baby left here temporarily? Was someone watching over her, or had they fled in panic? Suddenly, a rustling sound came from outside. Everyone tensed. Jake moved toward the door, hand hovering over his holster. A figure stepped out from the shadows, a young woman, eyes wide with fear, face streaked with dirt and tears. "I didn't want to leave her there. I didn't have a choice." Jake's voice softened. "Who's her? Are you the mother?" The woman nodded, trembling. "Yes, I was trying to keep her safe. But they were coming. I had to hide." Her Lisa stepped forward, notebook ready. "Who is coming?" "What happened?" The woman swallowed hard. "My boyfriend. He's dangerous. I thought if I could get her away, they'd never find her." Jake looked at Rex, who was wagging his tail gently but still watchful. The woman's story was piecing together, but the shadows in her eyes told of pain and fear deeper than words. She gave her name as Emily, a name that felt fragile and fierce. All at once, Jake sat with Emily outside the cabin, wrapped in blankets supplied by the officers. The night air was still heavy with tension, but there was a flicker of hope. Emily recounted the terrifying events, an abusive relationship escalating, threats made against her and the baby, a desperate plan to hide the child where no one would think to look. She admitted she'd left the baby by the roadside because she feared her pursuer would follow her into the woods and, worse, harm the child if he caught them both. Jake listened intently, heart aching. This wasn't just a case of abandonment, it was survival. Back at the hospital, baby Hope was stable enough to be monitored overnight. Social services were alerted, ready to step in and protect the child. Jake made a call to his captain, summarizing the situation. "We've got a witness, maybe a victim too. We're going to need a full investigation. This goes beyond a roadside abandonment." The captain's voice was firm but supportive. "Keep me posted, Reynolds, and make sure Rex gets some rest. He's been a trooper." Jake glanced down at Rex, who lay beside the patrol car, eyes half closed but alert. "You did good, buddy." As dawn began to break, painting the sky in pale pinks and blues, Jake reflected on the night's events. The case was far from over. Danger still lingered somewhere out there waiting to resurface. But tonight, a life had been saved. A silent signal had been answered, and Jake knew this was only the first chapter. The sun rose slowly over the quiet town of Millbrook, casting a soft golden light through the tall oaks and maples that lined Main Street. It was the kind of morning that made you forget the darkness of the night before. But for Officer Jake Reynolds, the shadows lingered. The case of the abandoned baby and the frightened woman who'd come forward was far from simple. Jake sipped his coffee in the precinct's small break room, eyes darting between a map spread across the table and a growing pile of case files. Rex lay patiently at his feet, ears perked but resting. The dog had earned a few hours' rest, but Jake knew this was only a pause, not an end. "Any new leads?" Detective Lisa Moreno asked, stepping inside. Her face was tired but determined. Jake shook his head. "Emily's story fits, but raises more questions. Who exactly is this boyfriend, and how deep does this danger go?" Lisa rubbed her chin thoughtfully. "We're still missing the bigger picture. There's something about this that doesn't add up." Jake leaned forward, tracing the path Rex had taken the night before on the map. "Rex led us from the roadside to the cabin, but after that, the trail vanished. Whoever was with Emily must have been careful." Lisa nodded. "That kind of caution means planning. This isn't random." Later that morning, Jake and Lisa returned to the cabin. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine needles and earth. The front door creaked open with a push, revealing the familiar mess inside. The torn blanket lay on the floor, a silent witness to the night's chaos. Rex padded quietly ahead, nostrils flaring as he sniffed the floor and the faded wallpaper. Then, suddenly, he stopped. Jake crouched, watching as Rex pawed at a loose floorboard. Near the fireplace, with a grunt, Jake pried it open. Inside the hollow was a small, muddy envelope. Jake carefully pulled it out and unfolded the damp paper. Inside it was a letter, hastily scrawled, smudged by water and dirt. "I'm sorry. I'm doing this to keep her safe. If you find her, please help her. He's dangerous. He won't stop." No signature. No name. Jake's throat tightened. Back at the precinct, the letter was examined under better light. The handwriting was rushed, but consistent. No immediate matches in the system. The phrase, "he's dangerous," was chilling enough on its own. Lisa tapped the table, eyes focused. "It confirms what Emily said, but it still leaves us guessing." Jake nodded, and whoever wrote it was scared enough to hide it. Here meaning they were close. The team began canvassing the neighborhood surrounding the cabin, knocking on doors, showing photos of Emily and the baby. Most residents were tight-lipped or evasive. Millbrook was a small town with big secrets. Meanwhile, at the hospital, the baby was being closely monitored. Nurse Olivia Turner, a woman with a gentle touch and years of experience in the neonatal unit, watched over Hope with tender vigilance. "She's strong for her size," Olivia remarked to the attending physician, "but there's no way to know what she's been through." The doctors ran tests, checked for infections, and documented the baby's condition. There were no obvious signs of trauma, but the lack of medical records made it difficult to provide full care. Social workers began the process of placing Hope in temporary foster care. While law enforcement worked to uncover her origins, Jake returned to the station late afternoon, greeted by a call on his radio. The voice was crackling but urgent. "Officer Reynolds, we've got a report. A man matching the description of Emily's boyfriend was spotted near the edge of town. He was seen with a woman and a child, could be related to your case." Jake's heart quickened. "Send units there now," he ordered. At the edge of Millbrook, under a rusted street lamp flickering to life, a small group of officers had gathered around a worn pickup truck. The man in question was tall, rough around the edges, with hard eyes that scanned the street like a predator. Jake and Lisa arrived, Rex at their heels. The man spotted them and bolted, disappearing into a nearby alley. "After him," Jake shouted, sprinting forward. Rex surged ahead, nose to the ground. The chase twisted through backyards and fences, the man's heavy footsteps echoing in the narrow spaces. Suddenly, Rex barked sharply and darted toward a dumpster. The man tried to climb over, but Rex lunged, grabbing his jacket and pulling him back. Jake caught up, cuffing the man as others arrived. The man struggled but was quickly subdued in the interrogation room. The man sat slumped, bruised but defiant. "Why'd you leave the baby on the road?" Jake asked. The man sneered. "Wasn't my baby, she was trouble. The kid's mother's crazy. I wanted to get rid of the whole mess." Jake's eyes narrowed. "You put that child's life in danger." The man shrugged. "What's done is done. You can't protect her from the real world." Outside the station, Emily arrived, guarded and shaken. She watched the man through the window, tears welling in her eyes. Lisa approached her gently. "We'll do everything we can to keep you and the baby safe." Emily nodded, voice trembling. "I just want her to have a chance." That night, as Jake walked Rex back to the patrol car, the town felt quieter, almost too quiet. The danger was still there, lurking in the shadows, but tonight they had made a breakthrough. Rex rested his head on Jake's knee, eyes reflecting the streetlights. "You're a good dog, Rex," Jake murmured. "And we're just getting started." The days that followed were heavy with tension. Millbrook's quiet streets seemed to hold their breath, waiting for the next move in a game no one wanted to play. Officer Jake Reynolds found himself walking a thin line between hope and dread, knowing that every answer uncovered only deepened the mystery. The interrogation room remained a battlefield of words and silence. The man they'd caught the boyfriend Emily spoke of was a tough nut to crack. His name was Carl Harper, a drifter with a history of violence and intimidation. Yet behind his cold exterior, there was something else. Fear, not for himself, but for the child. Jake and Detective Lisa Moreno worked tirelessly, piecing together fragments from witnesses and background checks. Emily's story began to gain clarity, but the shadows lurking behind the scenes refused to fully reveal themselves. One foggy morning, Jake stood outside the precinct, breathing in the cool air tinged with the scent of rain and pine. Rex padded at his side, nose to the ground, sensing the unease in the town. "Rex, stay sharp," Jake murmured, scanning the horizon. A call came over the radio, crackling and urgent. "Officer Reynolds, we've got movement near the old Thompson farm. Possible sighting of a suspicious vehicle matching previous descriptions." Jake's pulse quickened. The Thompson farm was on the outskirts of town, abandoned for years and swallowed by wild brush and creeping ivy, a place children dared not enter. "On my way," Jake responded, motioning for Rex to move out. The drive was short but tense. As they approached the farm, the fog thickened, curling around the skeletal remains of the farmhouse like ghostly fingers. The rusted gate squealed as Jake pushed it open, eyes darting between the broken windows and sagging. Porch. Rex led the way, tail stiff, nose low to the ground. The dog's instincts were razor-sharp, honed through years of training and partnership. Suddenly, Rex stopped, ears pricked. Jake followed the dog's gaze to a darkened shed at the edge of the property. The door hung slightly ajar. "Stay here," Jake whispered to Rex, though the dog moved alongside him without hesitation. Inside the shed, the air was thick with dust and the faint smell of gasoline. Broken tools and empty crates littered the floor. As Jake's flashlight swept across the space, a faint noise caught his attention, a soft whimper, almost drowned by the rustling wind. He stepped closer and found a small bundle wrapped in a tattered blanket. "Hope." Jake, single quotes as heart tightened as he knelt beside the baby, who stirred weakly at the sound of his voice. Suddenly, a noise from outside made Jake freeze. Footsteps, deliberate, heavy, approached the shed. He quickly grabbed Hope, pressing a finger to her lips to calm her. Rex growled low, hackles raised. The door creaked wider. Two figures stepped into the dim light. A man and a woman, faces obscured by shadows but their posture hard, guarded. Jake's hand moved to his holster. "Step away," he ordered. The man snarled. "You're messing with things you don't understand, cop." The woman's voice was cold. "That baby doesn't belong to you." Jake's eyes narrowed. "She belongs to no one who would leave her to die." A tense standoff unfolded as the figures debated retreating or advancing. Rex barked sharply, stepping forward to shield Jake and the baby. Suddenly, the woman lunged, trying to grab Hope. Jake reacted instantly, pulling the baby to safety and pushing the woman back. The man charged. Jake dodged, drawing his taser and firing. The man collapsed, convulsing on the ground. Lisa's backup arrived just in time, securing the scene and arresting the pair in the aftermath. Jake held Hope close, feeling the fragile rhythm of her heartbeat. The danger was real and close, but for now, she was safe. Emily's warnings had been true. Someone was desperate enough to fight for the baby's fate hand. Jake was determined to see it through. That night, back at the precinct, Jake and Lisa sifted through the new evidence recovered from the shed. Among the scattered papers was a faded photograph of a family smiling, innocent, and broken. "This changes everything," Lisa said quietly. Jake nodded, eyes heavy. Time to dig deeper. The fog outside thickened again, swallowing the town. In a silent embrace, but inside, a silent promise was made. No shadow too dark, no secret too deep, would stop them from protecting the smallest, most vulnerable lives. The morning sun spilled over Millbrook, casting long shadows through the quiet streets as the town slowly woke, but inside the police station, the atmosphere was anything but calm. The discovery at the old Thompson farm had cracked open a case that was far deeper than Jake Reynolds and Detective Lisa Moreno had imagined. Jake sat behind his desk, a stack of new files spread before him, alongside the faded family photograph pulled from the shed. The smiling faces in the photo seemed out of place against the grim realities of the investigation. He traced a finger over the worn edges, eyes narrowing in thought. Lisa leaned over, flipping through reports on her laptop. "We've got a name now, Margaret Ellis. She was listed missing 3 years ago. Her child may be the baby we're caring for." Jake exhaled slowly. So this baby could be Margaret's. That would explain a lot. Why Emily was so scared, why Carl Harper was involved, and why this whole thing's been buried so long. The pieces began to fall into place, but there were still too many questions left unanswered. Where was Margaret? Was she alive? And if not, who had taken up the dangerous task of hiding her baby away from harm? Jake and Lisa knew they needed to get answers fast. They started by tracking down anyone who had known Margaret Ellis. A series of interviews with neighbors, distant relatives, and social workers painted a picture of a woman trapped in a life she couldn't escape. Reports of domestic violence, threats, and fear always hushed whispers that no one dared to shout. One neighbor, Mrs. Carter, recalled hearing screams late one night years ago, but had been too afraid to intervene. A last-ditch attempt by Margaret to seek help calls that stopped abruptly. Jake felt the weight of it all. She was trying to protect her child, probably knowing what was coming. But something went wrong. Lisa nodded solemnly, and Emily got caught in the middle. She's not just a witness, she's a survivor. Meanwhile, back at the hospital, Hope had become the quiet center of everyone's attention. Nurse Olivia Turner watched over her with unwavering care, noting every small sign of strength in the fragile infant. One afternoon, Jake stopped by the hospital carrying a small teddy bear from the precinct. As he sat beside the incubator, he whispered softly, "You're safe now. We're going to find out where you belong." Hope's tiny fingers twitched in response, as if sensing the promise. But the real breakthrough came unexpectedly. Late one evening, as Jake was reviewing surveillance footage from the Thompson farm area, something caught his eye: a shadowy figure, moving quickly through the trees. Clutching a bundle wrapped in blankets, he zoomed in, heart pounding. The figure's face was obscured, but the movement was unmistakable. Jake called Lisa immediately. "We've got someone." Moving near the farm around the time the baby was left, they coordinated with patrol units to search the surrounding woods. At first light, hoping to catch whoever had been hiding in the shadows for so long, the next morning was cold and misty. Jake, Lisa, and a team of officers spread out along the wooded edge. Following faint tracks and broken branches, Rex led the way, nose to the ground, ears twitching with every scent. Suddenly, Rex stopped and barked, alerting the team to a hidden path obscured by thick brush. Jake pushed through, coming upon a small clearing, and there, sitting quietly, was a woman. Her eyes were wary but tired, and in her arms was a baby. Swaddled tightly, Jake approached slowly, hands raised in a gesture of peace. "Hi, I'm Officer Reynolds. We want to help." The woman's eyes flickered with a mixture of fear and relief. "My name is Sarah," she said softly. "I was looking after Hope. I promised Margaret I'd keep her safe." Sarah's story unfolded like a fragile thread, one of courage, sacrifice, and a desperate fight against forces that sought to tear families apart. Margaret, Sarah explained, had entrusted her with the baby when things grew too dangerous. Sarah had hidden Hope away in the woods, moving her as threats closed in, hoping to buy time. Jake felt a deep respect for Sarah's bravery. "You did the right thing," he assured her. Sarah nodded, but her eyes held the weight of too many sleepless nights. "I never wanted her to be alone," she said quietly, "but I was scared, and I didn't know who I could trust." Back at the station, Jake and Lisa worked to ensure Sarah's protection. Knowing the danger was far from over, the tangled web surrounding Margaret, Emily, Carl Harper, and now Sarah was complex, but the core was clear. A baby, abandoned and hidden, whose life depended on their courage to uncover the truth. That evening, Jake sat alone, staring out over Millbrook's glowing streets. Hope was safe, but the story was just beginning to unfold. He looked down at Rex, curled at his feet. "We're going to bring this family justice," Jake promised. And in the quiet night, beneath the stars, that promise carried the weight of hope. The night was calm over Millbrook, but inside the police station, the atmosphere buzzed with quiet determination. After weeks of painstaking investigation, broken leads, and sleepless nights, Officer Jake Reynolds finally felt a flicker of closure. Hope, the tiny newborn abandoned on the roadside and hidden away in shadowed woods, was finally on a path to safety. But more than that, a tangled web of secrets and pain had begun to unravel, revealing a story of courage, survival, and the will to protect, even in the darkest times. Jake sat at his desk, the soft hum of the station around him. Lisa Moreno stood nearby, reviewing the final reports. Across town, Sarah was placed in protective custody. Her brave testimony pivotal in dismantling the dangerous threats that had loomed over Hope's life. Emily had been granted a chance to rebuild, supported by social workers and community resources. Carl Harper was behind bars, his threats and violence no longer a shadow over the fragile family. It hadn't been easy. The path was littered with heartbreak and unanswered questions. But Jake found solace in the simple truth. A baby's life had been saved, and a community had begun to heal. He looked down at Rex, who had quietly settled by the patrol car's tires, eyes watching with unwavering loyalty. "You did good, partner," Jake whispered, reaching down to ruffle the dog's ears. The next morning, Jake visited the hospital. Hope was nestled in a crib by the window, bathed in soft sunlight. Nurse Olivia Turner smiled warmly as Jake approached. "She's growing stronger every day," Olivia said. "A little fighter." Jake nodded, heart swelling with hope. "She deserves all the chances in the world." As he stood there, watching the tiny fingers curl and uncurl, Jake realized this was more than a case. It was a reminder of why he did what he did, to protect the vulnerable, to stand up for those who couldn't stand for themselves. Back at the station, the community began to rally. Local organizations offered support for families affected by violence, and the story of hope sparked a conversation about safety and second chances. Jake found himself invited to community meetings, schools, and local events, sharing the story of the brave canine and the fragile baby who changed everything. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the trees, Jake sat quietly, thinking back on the journey. From the sudden bark on a dark highway to the hidden clues and forgotten places, every step had been a testament to vigilance and heart. He knew there would always be shadows, dangers lurking just out of sight. But with partners like Rex, and a community willing to stand together, hope could shine through even the darkest night. Before leaving the precinct, Jake paused to speak directly to the camera, a gentle smile breaking through the fatigue. "Thank you for following the story," he said warmly. "It's a reminder that heroes come in all shapes and sizes, sometimes with forepaws and a keen nose. If you want to hear more stories of courage and hope, don't forget to subscribe to Brave Animals. Together, we can make a difference." He glanced down at Rex, who wagged his tail eagerly. Jake continued, "Now, I want to hear from you. What do you think it takes to be a hero in your community? Leave your thoughts below, and remember, every small act of kindness matters." As the camera faded, the quiet streets of Millbrook settled once more. But the story of hope, Jake and Rex lingered in, enduring signal of light in the silence. Thank you for joining us on this journey. What acts of kindness or courage have inspired you lately? Share your story with us in the comments.